Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, and our viewing audience. Before we begin our presentations on the Public Works Capital Improvement Program projects, I would like to introduce our City Treasurer, Ms. Lee Henderson, to provide some information concerning a proposal that she has to defer penalties and delay some tax collections for hotel taxes, admission taxes, and meal taxes. Lee?
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. It's interesting here in the virtual world having to do this. So 2 Fridays ago, I sent a memo to Mr. Leahy, the acting city manager, to discuss a proposal on payment plans for trust taxes. We've had a lot of businesses reach out to my office and have concerns about making their payments timely for trust taxes given the environment that we're in right now. So the memo was distributed to council 2 Fridays ago for consideration or for review, and then I believe that it was also in the council packet that was delivered Friday for council review. In the meantime, the Commissioner of the Revenue, Mr. Kellum, and I have allowed for filings and payments without penalty to be made through the end of March, which is today. And I think that that is a short-term solution, but not anything that lasts any longer than today. There's still an enormous concern in the business community in these unprecedented times. They are laying off their employees, closing their doors, struggling to change their business models, and not being able to pay their rent, their leases, and their loans. And we've had several businesses reach out to us and express those concerns, so we're trying to be proactive in this environment. Many are calling for council action, but with the timing of formal council actions and votes, this is a plan that I can enact without council voting on it. The program itself is voluntary and intended to help businesses weather the storm. It's my responsibility to collect the taxes, but it's the goal to give businesses the opportunity to stay in business. Staying open or reopening later will also allow their employees who are suffering as well to get back to work. If the business closes, it becomes more difficult and sometimes impossible to collect the taxes. So the terms of the payment plan are as follows. First, the business will be asked to fill out a payment plan request form, and this allows for the taxes due during the state of emergency to be paid at a later date after the conclusion of the state of emergency and in installments. Businesses should still file their gross receipts by the 20th of each month. Once the state of emergency is lifted, the business will have 30 days to work with my office to finalize the formal payment plan agreements, which would be the start date, the payment amount, the number of payments. And the taxes included in the payment plan will not accrue additional penalties as long as the payment plan terms are honored. Except for the delay in formalizing the payment plan terms, this payment plan concept is consistent with our normal payment plan options provided by my office. I asked to speak today and talk about this because I think it's important that the Treasurer's Office, the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office, and Council be on the same path forward and be able to communicate with their citizens in the same manner. I don't need the council action to enact this payment plan concept, but I think the communication among all of us is important. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. So, Mayor and members of council, I did send a letter to you on Friday reviewing this proposal again, and I wanted to let you know that Ms. Henderson will be available at the formal session at 6 o'clock if you have questions for her at that time. Now, before we again get to Public Works, I would like to ask the Director of the Virginia Beach Department of Public Health, Dr. Demetria Lindsay, and the Director of the Virginia Beach Office of Emergency Management, Ms. Erin Sutton, if they would give a brief update on where we are with the COVID-19 emergency situation. Dr. Lindsay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, and the general public. I would like to provide the latest updates of our counts of COVID-19 confirmations in Virginia Beach. We have, as of 3/30/2020, we have 65 cases officially reported to the Virginia Department of Health. Since that time, we've had 23 additional cases that are not reflected in the Virginia Department of Health website. That brings us to a total of 88 positive cases in Virginia Beach. Of those cases, 14 individuals have been hospitalized, which represents 25% of the cases that we've investigated. There have been also 2 deaths, and since we began following cases and contact investigations, we've had 4 individuals who have been released from isolation, meaning they have recovered from their illness. The average age of individuals who have tested positive in Virginia Beach is 52 years of age, and they have ranged from as young as 2 years old to 80 plus years old. 36% of those have been female and 48% male, which represents a slightly higher rate in males, which we've also seen it in other areas of the country and the world. I want to point out that there is a lag in reporting due to the length of turnaround, particularly in private labs, which has been taken as long as 7 to 10 days. So what we see currently in our data is more of a reflection of perhaps a week ago or maybe as long as several weeks. There is an outbreak. This is an outbreak with potential for very rapid expansion, as you can see from that jump from 65 cases to 88 cases. We will continue to see expanding and increasing numbers. What we're seeing now, again, is a reflection of what may have occurred a week or more ago when the individual presented with symptoms, and also reflecting back that there may have been as much as 2 to 14 days of an incubation period from the point of their exposure. Among cases in Virginia Beach, based on the evidence that we have now, I feel that we do have sufficient evidence to say that we are seeing community-level transmission, and this is a concern. We are reviewing our data closely and regularly to closely discern as much as possible the level and extent of this transmission in our community. It's critical that we all recognize that this is a very serious outbreak. The number and rate of increases of cases and deaths that we experience is dependent on what we all do. Seniors and those with health issues must stay home as much as possible. While youth may be at lower risk for complications, we also see complications in them as well. So it's very important that we all take this seriously, and we all have loved ones who are impacted. So I strongly encourage everyone to follow the governor's recommendations, reduce any opportunity for gatherings. This is not a time for socializing. This is a time for taking this very seriously, staying out of crowds, staying at home as much as possible, and following those public health recommendations that we've talked about many times before. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just to give you some updates on kind of some federal, state, and local areas. So as you all are well aware of, Governor Northam issued a statewide stay-at-home order yesterday. The executive order took effect immediately and remains in place until June 10th. The order directs all Virginians to stay home except in extremely limited circumstances. And just to review for everyone, individuals may leave their residence for allowable travel, including to seek medical attention, work, care for family or household members, obtaining goods and services like groceries, prescriptions, and others as outlined in Executive Order 53, and engage in outdoor activity with strict social distancing requirements. Beaches are currently open for exercise and fishing only. President Trump on March 27th did sign the CARES Act into law, and our city is currently assessing the funding streams coming through the CARES Act and determining how to establish and implement these programs. Governor Northam applied for a major disaster declaration as of yesterday to allow for potentially more comprehensive reimbursement measures in the future, and are waiting to find out that decision. Governor Northam also requested to activate the National Guard under Title 32, enabling the state to use additional resources to meet COVID-19 response missions across the Commonwealth. VDEM is leading an effort to assess alternative care locations throughout the Commonwealth with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we are waiting to understand what that means for us. As you're all aware, the city status is under modified operating conditions, and the city is further assessing operations given the governor's new executive order. Schools have moved into virtual learning from just doing the continuity of learning to a virtual learning, expanding their feeding operations and developing plans to provide for feeding on the weekends. The biggest issue that I'm sure you're all very well aware of is the availability of PPE for our responders and key personnel throughout the city. Virginia Department of Health or Virginia Department of Emergency Management stated on their call today that at this point they have resource requests for over 3 million N95 masks, 4.5 million surgical masks, 8 million for gloves, and is unable to fill any of that at this time. So they have stated that all localities, if they can find a vendor, to go ahead and order it. So we are working through that locally. We've centralized our resource ordering and are working with departments in prioritizing that. We have a COVID-19 task force and designated working groups that continue to meet on a weekly basis to address varying issues, gaps, and services. This week, we established the recovery work group to address long-term recovery, including assistance for household and businesses, fueling economic development after this end, addressing human service needs, and other potential long-term impacts. The city is assessing how to potentially shift staff around as we go into a longer time of teleworking to ensure enough capacity for essential functions here in our city. Special Events Work Group continues to work through the calendar, and as the executive order states, looking at events scheduled out through June 10th to cancel or reschedule. The city is continuing to develop plans for child care support for essential employees and healthcare staff. That group has been working together on a daily basis with schools and Parks and Rec to put a plan together to allow for child care, as that is a challenge for some of our essential employees, and obviously our health care. And we continue to partner with Centera to work through hospital surge planning for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Dr. Lindsay. At this time, Mayor and members of council, I would like to introduce the Director of Public Works, Mark Johnson. He will introduce today's capital improvement program briefings. Thank you. Mark?
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Mark Johnson, Director of Public Works. Today, Public Works is here to present 4 of the 9 CIP sections. Those 4 CIP sections represent 50% of the FY21 $333 million CIP. The flow of the presentation is going to be Tom Nicholas, Facilities Engineer, is going to present buildings, followed by the stormwater presentation, which will be with Tony Utterback, Chief Engineer of the Engineering Center, Diana St. John, Chief Engineer of the Stormwater Surface Water Group, Mark Jones for the operations and maintenance side of it. He's the Chief Engineer of Construction and Engineering, followed by David Jarman, Transportation Engineer, which will talk about the roadway section. And then closing out will be Dan Adams, Senior Coastal Engineer, and he will present the coastal CIP section. Now we'll start with Tom Nicholas, Buildings and Assets.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer, members of City Council, Mr. Leahy, city staff, and guests. Again, I'm Tom Nicholas, Public Works Facilities Engineer, and I'm here to talk about the City Manager's proposed capital improvement program for fiscal years 2021 through 25-26 in buildings and assets. Projects with no changes. As you can see from this slide and the slides that you have in your packet, there are 9 CIP projects in the Buildings and Assets CIP for which funding is required at the exact same level as was appropriated in the FY 2020 adopted budget. The only project within the group that is not yet fully funded is CIP 3504 Beach Maintenance Facility. Not too concerned about that at this point. The design of that project is funded in fiscal year 24. Construction is funded in 25. And we're eventually going to need to recover $6 million that was removed from the construction amount during the FY 2020 budget process to address other higher priority funding needs. Similar to projects, but moving on to programs, this slide shows 6 of 12 programs for which funding is again requested at the same level as the FY 2020 adopted budget. I'll talk through them very briefly. 3506 Fire Facility Rehab and Renewal is the CIP we use for fire station HVAC equipment, roofing, bay air filter systems, and other maintenance work specific to fire stations. 3141 is our various buildings heating, ventilation, and air conditioning CIP, and we do chiller plant maintenance, HVAC equipment replacements at various buildings throughout the city. 3165 is the CIP for building maintenance, working with Virginia Aquarium to do specific building system maintenance at the aquarium. And 3155 Aquarium Renewal is similar to that, although these funds are for various aquarium equipment exhibit systems and infrastructure. 3518 is the Convention Center Capital Maintenance, which is in this coming year, escalator repair, ballroom carpet replacement, a variety of things in the ballroom, and then HVAC, DDC equipment, and some fire suppression systems. And they're looking forward to fiscal year 22, which is a $4.4 million year for them to do some significant renovations and renewals at the convention center. And last on this page, CIP 3164 is our CIP energy performance contracts, where we have $1.2 million in work pending against our Amoresco energy performance contract for energy retrofits at the SeaTac Rec Center, Fire Station 21, buildings 18 and 18A, and some facilities at Public Works Dam Neck. Continuing with programs with no changes, this slide shows the second 6 of 12 programs, again, for which funding is requested at the same level as the FY 2020 adopted budget. 3132 is Heritage Building Maintenance, which is near and dear to a number of you. There is still funding in this CIP to continue with the Francis Land House renovation and other requirements being assessed for our historic buildings. 3157 Facility Planning Studies. Those of you who aren't familiar with this, this funding is primarily used for asset management, condition assessment, and gathering data on our buildings and helping us plan more efficient use of CIPs in the future. 3135 is Fire Apparatus 4, and really that's the Virginia Beach Fire Department working with Public Works Fleet to replace our fire equipment. 3154 Fire Training Center improvements. A number of you may not know, but we're really in the midst of a $6.2 million renovation at the Fire Training Center. $4.4 million came from the previous CIP and is being used. There's $1.4 million in the existing CIP that's already been funded to date. And with $300K in FY 21 and 22, we'll complete that renovation work at the Fire Training Center. CIP 3153, various site acquisitions, is really funds controlled by the city manager and management services to augment any funding we would need to acquire property for various CIPs in the city. And 3056, similar to 3135, public safety equipment replacement is, again, the Virginia Beach Police Department working with Public Works Fleet to replace and replenish our public safety vehicles. So some of the projects that, again, the funding line isn't changing, but there is information that I would like to share with you on several specific projects. Again, one of the top projects that I've been working on for the last 5 years is 3072 City Hall replacement. If you've seen behind the building, that is coming along nicely. The new parking lot is complete and accepted to the west of Building 2. Foundation work and structural steel erection is progressing nicely, and we are still on track to achieve substantial completion in August of 2021 and occupy that facility in the fall of 2021, hardly 18 months from now. And there's no need right now for any additional funding. CIP 3075 Fire EMS Station, Burton Station. We opened bids about 10 days ago on this, and the low bidder was A.R. Chesson of Elizabeth City, North Carolina. We will be working with A.R. Chesson to sign a contract and issue a notice to proceed in May of this year. Again, with completion of that facility, a 3-bay station housing fire and emergency medical service personnel in July of 2021. CIP 3071 Virginia Beach Public Library transformation. This has been ongoing for a couple of years, providing architectural, plumbing, electrical, lighting, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning and furnishing enhancements to 8 of our city libraries. Phase 1 is now complete. Kempsville, Bayside, Princess Anne, and Central Library are done. Design is in progress for Great Neck, Oceanfront, Windsor Woods, and Pungo Blackwater. We will finish that design and get a solicitation out this fall. Work will start in the winter of 2020, and then the completion of those 4 libraries finishes at varying times throughout calendar year 2021. A very exciting CIP that's ongoing is CIP 3028 Aquarium Marsh Pavilion Enhancements. Again, this is the renovation of the existing Marsh Pavilion, or the south building at the Aquarium. A number of enhancements, revolving exhibits, theater enhancements, feature exhibit gallery, ticketing area. That work is well along and will complete construction in April of 2021. Several of the projects that I talked about, well, the projects now that I'd like to talk about are ones that are being modified in the 2021. So you saw them in the FY20 adopted budget, but in 2021 there is some financial adjustments. The first, and without question the most significant, is CIP 3174 Operations Facilities Renovations. You'll remember that in July of last year we got together and created this CIP sort of out of a collage of existing CIPs that were no longer needed in order to fund the renovation of buildings 1, 2, and 11 as a result of the 31 May mass casualty event. $4 million was put into that CIP in fiscal year 20 to enable me to start preparation of the request for proposal documentation. Happy to say that at this point we completed that. The request for statements of qualification, request for qualifications went out in January. We shortlisted 5 design-build teams to compete for this work, which is the maximum allowed by our city ordinance. Those 5 firms picked up their request for proposal packages today, and proposals will be due in June. That will enable us to award this contract in July, start to work in August, and if all goes according to schedule, and we certainly hope it will, Building 2 will be renovated and become the new home of the 1st Police Precinct and Police Admin in the fall of 2021. That timing is meant to coincide with the completion of the new City Hall, so that as we empty this building and move into the new City Hall, we will also be emptying Building 11, the Public Safety Building, and moving into the renovated Building 2, allowing our single contractor to then have access to this building and to the Public Safety Building to expedite the work and complete his work as cheaply as possible. All in all, will be done in the fall of 2023 with all 3 renovation projects. Project 3162, Veterans Memorial Sustainment. This is a project to refresh or address pond leakage, repair the structural integrity, recoat the ponds and fin structures, and replace all the mechanical and electrical equipment. The Veterans Memorial was in pretty poor shape. This was a $500,000 CIP. When we got through planning and design, realized we needed more like $700,000 to actually do it all as one package. So Management Services worked with us and found $200,000 in additional dollars that could be put into appropriated to date, and we had $100,000 in the program for FY21. So as this budget, if enacted, we will move quite quickly to construction and have this work done in the spring of 2021, actually in February, which really won't be too long after the completion of the new sports center, and that whole corner will be wrapped up and look quite nice. CIP 3069, Euclid Yard Facility Replacement. Many of you have heard me talk about Euclid Yard for the last 4 or 5 years. It is a close second to beach maintenance for the most challenging facilities in the city's inventory. Last year, we did manage to get this project into the CIP with just $225,000, sort of as a seed to keep it in the program. This year, as CIP dollars became a bit tight, we went ahead and pulled the $225,000 out of appropriated to date and have left this project unfunded but in the program. So we will address the $14 million requirement in future years, but at this point, it's in the program as an unfunded project. CIP 3074 is the sister project at Aquarium Marsh Pavilion. This one is for the veterinary clinic. Again, it was awarded at the same time. Completion date is at the same time, April 2021. We are putting $1.7 million into this program, again, and appropriated to date out of city funds. This is to construct a parking lot in front of the veterinary clinic that was originally in the scope. 2 years ago, it was pulled from the scope to enable us to do additional work in the buildings, and funding wasn't available at that time to fund those additions. So at this point, we're putting $1.7 million back in ATDs to enable us to complete that whole project. Programs being modified in the 2021 City Manager's proposed CIP include these: facilities access systems. Since the 31st of May last year, we have seen a significant increase, as you might expect, in the request for Linnell Systems installation at exterior and interior doors throughout the city, as well as requests for intercom systems, duress buttons, and that type of equipment. So what was $125,000 per year across the line to really do Linnell, we have beefed it up by $300,000 per year to a new total of $425,000. I assure you we will watch very closely what the expenditures are in the first couple of years of that to ensure that $425,000 is the right number. CIP 3149, various buildings rehab and renewal 4. That's really my building maintenance CIP that we use for most of the city-owned buildings for a whole variety of maintenance. It also became the primary funder, however, for a lot of the activities after the 31st of May when we were relocating our 387 people to 28 locations. And then as we got planning and information technology into lease facilities, and we are now working on public utilities and public works to get them into lease facilities until those renovations are complete. There is a plus up of $1.4 million in FY21. That 1.4 is really for getting public works into built-out lease facilities and making accommodations for public works real estate that was displaced as a result of the temporary relocations. CIP 3115, Judicial Center Maintenance. This is a giving back to the CIP. $70,000 will come out of FY21 and FY22. It's all in green because none of that is city money. The CIP 3115 money comes from a portion of court fees that is paid to the city to support Judicial Center maintenance. We had programmed for years $70,000 per year. That court fee payment never came anywhere close to that $70,000 a year, so we have zeroed it out for the next 2 years with the hope by FY23 we'll probably have about that much in order to do some work. CIP 3510, Intermediate Care Facilities, Renewal and Replacement. Again, this one we are removing $120,627 from fiscal year 21, really at the request of Human Services. They manage that CIP for taking care of intermediate care facilities, and they let Management Services know that really they didn't need that $120,000 in FY21 and would be great to skip a year and move on, picking it up again in FY22. A CIP that I know you all know quite well, 3122 Police Department helicopter. In order to expedite the procurement of that helicopter, the second helicopter, $2.5 million was taken out of 21. The appropriated to date amount was beefed up by $4.6 million, providing the funding for Public Works Fleet to go ahead and procure that helicopter, and they were on their way to do that. I understand that at this point we've put that on pause for a bit, but the funding right now is there if in fact we decide to move ahead with procurement of that helicopter. There are just 4 new projects and programs in the proposed CIP for FY 2021. The first, brand new and probably the most important as far as the new ones, CIP 3183, City Security Enhancements. We quickly learned that we needed money to help us and to help the Risk Assessment Committee that is looking at all of the security risks in the city to help prioritize our city assets, to identify threats to those assets, to assess the likelihood of any of those threats, and then to assess the risk of loss. This funding, which is $2.2 million in '21, $2.9 in '22, and then $500,000 each year after, will help us do planning, design, construction, purchase, or implementation of identified security measures. Right now, there's a whole suite of what's possible, and we're talking through what to address first with these dollars. CIP 3070, Correction Center Renewal. For a number of years, we have known of a long laundry list of deficiencies in the Correctional Center merely because the facility is old and heavily used. Showers, laundry and kitchen equipment, replacing flooring, renovating the visitation space all need done. It's a $13 million CIP. Unfortunately, the money is not there to address this sooner. But again, we have got this into the program in this particular budget cycle with $500,000 in FY25 and $500,000 in '26. And we will look for ways to cover the entire $13 million project or program as time unfolds. Another new CIP this year is 3184 Virginia Aquarium Monument Signs. It's again clear that the current signage at the Virginia Aquarium is old and doesn't provide the appropriate sense of arrival for what the aquarium is trying to accomplish with the public. This $600,000 CIP, funding all being provided in appropriated to date dollars, will replace and modernize the entrance sign, and the aquarium buildings and parking lot signage. Design is done for this. It wasn't a particularly extensive design. And because this money is in ATD, when the budget is approved, we will be able to solicit a construction contractor, get our notice to proceed out in July, and then hopefully by March of 2021, we will be done with this signage. And the last new CIP, 3182 Creed's Training Center Renovations Study. Some of you may not know that the Virginia Beach Police Department Creed's Training Center opened in 2009 as a unique all-encompassing training facility. The facility supports driving, simulated munitions or sim munitions, and scenario-based evolutions to provide training to recruits and veteran law enforcement officers that cannot be duplicated at any other location. So we know we need to repair or replace deteriorating Connex box buildings at that site. We know we need to repair and replace deteriorating concrete and asphalt paved surfaces, and we need to replace the driver training wet pad and track. Those are hugely expensive projects. So before we just started diving into one or picking off one and trying to fund it, we wanted to spend $250,000 and get our arms around the whole package and break it into executable chunks, again, to ensure the future of this valuable site. Again, dollars not being available for a while, currently have the funding of this study in fiscal year 2026. Again, as always, thank you for your continued support. It's been a very busy year in buildings and assets, but it's been a very successful year. And again, I thank you for the support to date. I'll be followed by Tony Utterback.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council, and others who may be watching. As they said, my name is Tony Utterback. I'm with the Public Works Stormwater Engineering Center Administrator. Today I have with me Mark Jones with Operations and Maintenance and Diana St. John with Stormwater Regulatory. We are here today to present the City Manager's proposed FY 21 through 26 Stormwater CIP. I'm going to begin and give an overview of the proposed Stormwater CIP, and then I'm going to move into the flood control section. Mark Jones will get up and present the Operations and Maintenance section of the Stormwater CIP, followed by Diana St. John, who will present the Stormwater Regulatory section, and she will stay up here and talk about some challenges that the stormwater program is facing. So this is a breakdown of the funding in the proposed FY 21 through 26 Stormwater CIP. The flood control section is the largest with $240.4 million, followed by operations and maintenance at $119.9 million, and then stormwater regulatory at $55 million, for a total 6-year target amount of $415.3 million. There are 62 projects and programs in the proposed stormwater CIP. There are 36 in flood control, 17 in operations and maintenance, and 9 in stormwater regulatory. There are 19 projects and programs that are not fully funded for a total balance to complete, or BTC, of $447.3 million. Of the 62 projects and programs in the proposed stormwater CIP, they have a total combined estimated cost of $1.2 billion. So moving into flood control. I'm going to begin by going over 2 projects that were constructed in 2019. The first one was Sherwood Lakes Drainage Projects. This project was completed in December at a cost of $3.4 million. This project included a pump station and a pipe to connect the 2 lakes within the Sherwood Lakes neighborhood. This allows us to maintain the water surface level between 3 and 4, and also allows us to draw down the lakes in advance of a significant storm to provide additional storage. The next project is the North Lake Holly Section 3A project. This project was completed in January at a cost of $4.6 million. In addition to stormwater infrastructure improvements, this project included sidewalk, roadway, as well as water and sanitary sewer improvements. Now there are 5 sections of the North Lake Holly project that have been completed. There are still 2 sections remaining. Section 3B, which is the next section to go to construction, covers the area between 14th Street and 16th Street to Cypress Avenue and Parks Avenue. That will go to construction later this summer. And the final section 1C, which includes embankment improvements on North Lake Holly, will go to construction next summer. As I mentioned, there are 36 projects and programs in the flood control section of the stormwater CIP. There are 22 of those projects that do not have any significant changes from the adopted FY20 CIP. 18 of them are shown here. There's a couple things I wanted to point out with this table. So 9 of those 22 projects are in the planning or design phase. 5 of them are currently under construction. All 5 of the Eastern Shore Drive projects that are in the proposed CIP are fully funded. And the sea level rise recurrent flooding analysis is complete. Today, we are uploading the final sea level rise adaptation strategy report to meet the requirements of our NOAA grant. The next steps with this program is to get a recommendation from Planning Commission and then come back to Council to adopt the stormwater strategies that are in this sea level rise adaptation strategy report. These are the remaining 4 projects with no significant changes. They are the Windsor Woods Phase 1 projects, and as you can see, they are fully funded in the 6-year CIP. Here are the ongoing programs that have no significant changes from the FY20 adopted CIP. The watershed stormwater projects are still unfunded. We are in the process of developing those master plans, which we presented to you back in February. When those master plans are complete for each watershed, we will be able to budget the individual projects that have been identified and include them in next year's CIP. The next few slides are projects that were modified from the FY20 adopted CIP. The first one is the Central Resort 24th Street Culvert Project. As you can see from the table at the bottom of the slide, if you look at the first line with the FY 2020 adopted, at the end in the total column, you can see the project was fully funded at $5.2 million. The next row showing the change shows in the total column that we removed $5.1 million, leaving $100,000 in appropriations to date. This funding was reallocated to Public Works Operations and Maintenance, and Mark Jones will talk about that briefly in a few minutes. I do want to mention we are still in the process of the design for this project. We are funding it under the parent project, which is the Central Resort District Project 7-041. And I also wanted to point out that that project, the design project, is being managed by a consultant due to our staffing shortage. The next project that was modified is another Central Resort project. It is the 16th Street Pump Station project. This project will redirect stormwater from the intersection of 21st Street and Baltic Avenue to the 16th Street Pump Station. As you can see from this table, looking at the FY 2020 adopted row, at the end of the column, you see that it was fully funded at $15 million. If you look in the change row at the end in the total column, we have removed $3.3 million. This $3.3 million was also reallocated to Public Works Operations and Maintenance. I did want to point out that we do have allocations shown for this project beginning in FY '23, so we will still begin the design phase and look to reprogram the $3.3 million in next year's CIP. The last project that's been significantly modified is the Princess Anne Plaza Golf Course Conversion Project. As you have heard us say, in order to help the flooding in the Princess Anne Plaza neighborhood, we need to provide additional storage. So we are going to convert the golf course to a multi-faceted facility, and we are now calling this the Bow Creek Stormwater Park. You will be happy to know that we are able to increase the funding in the 6-year program by $22.2 million. We've been able to do that by dividing the project into 3 sections, and we've now allocated the funding based on the design and construction of those sections. The picture you see on this slide is a rendering of a portion of the Stormwater Park with the existing Bow Creek Recreation Center in the background. Since this is a multi-phase, 10-year project, the sooner we can start, the sooner the neighborhood can see the benefits of this Stormwater Park. So we felt it was very important to increase the funding. Now I'm going to go over the new projects that have been added to the FY '21 proposed CIP. The first one is the Stormwater Green Infrastructure Project. You may have heard this called natural and nature-based features. This has been identified as an adaptation strategy as part of the Sea Level Rise report. It's considered a complementary flood risk management strategy to be used in conjunction with some of the larger structural strategies. So these are things like living shorelines, maritime forests, oyster reefs, submerged aquatic vegetation or SAVs, and beach and dune restoration. We are able to allocate $500,000 in FY '23 to begin this project. We continue to look for grant opportunities to fund the project sooner. The next project that we've added to the flood control section is the Army Corps of Engineers Regional Coastal Storm Risk Management Study. This study is required to receive federal funding assistance for the larger adaptation strategies that are identified in the Sea Level Rise report. This project will cost the city $1.5 million. It has also been referred to as a 3x3x3 study because the project costs $3 million, with $1.5 million being the city's share. It takes 3 years to complete, and there are 3 levels for review at the Corps: the district level, the division level, and the headquarters level. So we are fully funding this project in the 6-year CIP to show our commitment to the Army Corps of Engineers for this study. We did not get included in the FY 2020 work plan for the Army Civil Works program. However, we are still working with the state and federal delegation to get letters of support for next year's work plan. The last new project in the proposed CIP is the parcel level flood mitigation program. This CIP will initiate a flood mitigation program for individual parcels where the properties do not qualify for federal funding. The mitigation efforts under this CIP may include voluntary acquisitions, owner-occupied mitigation, which are things like elevating HVA systems and ductwork, or installing flood vents. A task force will be created to establish a process for homeowners to submit an application online. The initial $1.5 million shown in FY21 will go towards the establishment of the program, and the $500,000 annual funding will help ensure the sustainment of the program and continued mitigation efforts. So now I'm going to move into showing the projects that are being proposed for a bond referendum. The projects you see on this slide and the next slide are grouped together by neighborhood or area and summarized by district. So for example, under the Rose Hall District, you see the Princess Anne Plaza projects, the Windsor Woods projects, and the Lakes projects. These include all of the projects that are in those neighborhoods. They also include the Phase 1 and Phase 2 projects. So not all of the projects that are in the stormwater bond referendum are in the proposed CIP. These are all-inclusive stormwater projects that have been identified in each one of the districts. This is the rest of the projects by district. So you can see in the Princess Anne District, the Stormwater Green Infrastructure Project has been added, along with 3 road projects. The Sandbridge-Newbridge Intersection Improvement Project, this is the ultimate project where we will need right-of-way from the National Fish and Wildlife. This project is not funded currently. It is an above-target project within the roadway section. Indian River Road is the next roadway project shown in the bond referendum, as well as the Pungo Ferry Road project. Now, the Pungo Ferry Road project is included in the roadways proposed CIP as a new project. Dave Jarman will present on that shortly. So the total estimated funding needed to complete the identified projects in these districts is just over $450 million. So if you want to see further detail of all of the projects that have been lumped together in the previous slide, the next 2 slides show all 37 projects in alphabetical order. On this slide are the first 19. You can see which projects are funded or partially funded in the proposed FY21 through 26 CIP, and then you can also see the projects that are not included in the proposed CIP. The last column is the balance to complete, or the BTC, and that represents the column that I previously showed you that was titled Additional Funding Needed to Complete. These are the remaining 18 projects. I did want to mention some things about the list of projects you see before you. There are no maintenance projects identified. These are just the flood control projects. The list does not include the programs that are currently in the flood control section of the proposed CIP. So these are programs like the Master Plan Watershed projects, which I mentioned are not funded, the Neighborhood Stormwater Infrastructure projects, or the Southern Canals Lead Ditch projects. It also does not include any of the sea level rise projects, the adaptation strategies that have been identified. So again, the total estimated funding needed to complete is just over $450 million, and that's in addition to the proposed target funding of $415 million. And I wanted to point out that it doesn't free up funding in the Stormwater CIP, but it makes us able to fund the projects sooner and construct them sooner. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mark Jones, who will go over the operations and maintenance section of the Stormwater CIP.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, Director. I'd like to present the Operations and Maintenance FY21 through 26 Capital Improvement Program. There we go. First, looking at accomplishments, I have several to include of many, but just a few. Lynnhaven Woods, Lake Number 1. Dredging project was completed in July of 2019 at an estimated project cost of approximately $660,000. Removed approximately 7,000 cubic yards of sediment and debris to improve water quality and flood control for the residents of Lynnhaven Woods. Ocean Park 2 Stormwater Pump Station Rehabilitation Project was completed this March. It's wrapping up now. It's a large-scale stormwater pump station rehab project comprised of a complete pump change-out, wet well rehabilitation, full electrical upgrade, residents of Ocean Park to provide better stormwater service for the years to come. Total project cost was $1.4 million. Water's Edge Drive was recently completed. Stormwater improvement project. Drainage issues were addressed, utilizing swales and valley gutters to newly established outfall to remove periodic flooding during moderate rain events along a section of Water's Edge Drive. Project cost was approximately $264,000. Sand Fiddler Road. Drainage improvements, another recently completed project. Drainage improvement project to install approximately 560 linear feet. Stormwater pipe residential section of Sandbridge Road. Project costs approximately $230,000. Thalia Wayside neighborhood rehab and was completed in June of 2019. Completed stormwater television inspection, pipe repair, cured in place lining, approximately 8,600 linear feet of reinforced concrete pipe. Malibu rehabilitation project was completed the March. Prior to that, completed stormwater television pipe repair, also cured in place lining, approximately 14,000 linear feet reinforced concrete pipe. It's important to note we've completed 9 neighborhood rehabilitations to date since 2015. Projects with no changes in addition to the CIP. We still have the 42nd Street Pump Station outfalls. That was CIP 7079. That was $4.4 million. That work is in progress for modifications to meet the U.S. ACE requirements for mandated discrepancies by the Corps for the 42nd Street Pump Station. That work is ongoing. We have the following 12 programs between the two slides requested at target. Between the 12 CIPs annotated between the following two slides here and here. These remaining 2 programs and the slide you saw before summarize the FY21 program O&M at target program. The total cost is $16.5 million. Moving on to new projects, as Ms. Utterback mentioned before, these projects are proposed to be internally funded, utilizing internal funding, utilizing flood control central resort capital improvement funding for $10 million FY21. So this is one of 4. This is the first project, CIP 7103. Would utilize $2 million FY21 for improvements at Arctic Avenue drainage improvement to repair the invert and install 3 new structures for 2 corroded 92-inch corrugated metal pipes and slip line the inside of the pipe. It would also add 2 new structures. This project would use $2 million, as I alluded, of the $10 million proposed internal Beach District funding, Central Resort District. Second project, internally funded, a cave-in repair program, which, if you remember, that was a total $10 million need, or a $9 million need, 4.5 between 2 years. FY21 would use $2 million and $4 million FY22 to fund within target to address the 8-month backlog of caves, utilizing existing FY21 also from Central Resort project funding. The third would be improvements to Pinewood Road drainage improvements, 7107, also internally funded from the same funding source. Project is located in the Beach District, FY21 funding, approximately $1 million project cost. Utilizing these funds would replace an existing culvert that provides a small hydraulic opening and is currently deteriorating quickly as a main access point to a highly traveled residential area. Requires upgrading and replacement. And last but not least, the new projects of 4 is the 7106 roadside ditch program, which would use $1 million of the $10 million FY22, would also use the last of that internal funding, which would perform maintenance, rehabilitation, and sediment removal. And there's approximate 1-year backlog on roadside ditch work orders. There's currently no cycle. $5 million per year in the out years would be required to address a desired 10-year cycle, but ask for the $1 million up front to try and get a cycle on track using internal funding for that. Thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to regulatory compliance.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Diana St. John, and I will be presenting on the Stormwater Regulatory and Water Quality section of the Stormwater CIP. For this presentation, we first want to highlight 2 significant accomplishments: the Southern Boulevard Water Quality Improvement Project and the annual report as required under our Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4, permit. The Southern Boulevard Water Quality Improvement Project is a cost participation project for the construction of a wet pond that provides pollutant removal credits for the city. This $2.9 million project improves water quality in the Elizabeth River watershed, which ultimately drains to the Chesapeake Bay. In addition to meeting the needs of the adjacent apartment redevelopment project, this pond provides water quality improvements that help the city meet the impairment, otherwise known as total maximum daily load, or TMDL, requirements. The second significant accomplishment is the MS4 permit annual report. We have about 25 program areas that have specific requirements for implementation under this permit. These range from developing and implementing plans to reduce stormwater pollution, designing, constructing water quality projects, performing water quality monitoring, inspecting industrial facility outfalls, managing stormwater infrastructure data requirements, and providing education and outreach to our residents and visitors about preventing pollution. There are 3 projects in the stormwater quality section of the CIP. The first 2 projects involve modifications to existing lakes to improve the ability for them to remove nutrients, sediments, and other pollutants. These improvements will also help the quality of downstream waterways. Bayville will improve water quality in Lake Joyce, while Lake Edward will improve water quality in the Elizabeth River. These projects support compliance with the city's stormwater permit for both local waterways with impairments, or the TMDLs, as previously mentioned, and the Chesapeake Bay, TMDL. The third project, the Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration, is a cost participation with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to design and construct oyster reefs, wetlands, and aquatic vegetation in the river. These improvements will help to restore the Lynnhaven River and improve water quality for all beneficial uses. This tributary has been identified by the Chesapeake Bay program as one of the 10 tributaries to be restored by the year 2025 as part of the goal for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. The total 6-year project cost for these 3 projects is just under $20 million. There are 6 programs in the stormwater quality section. The first 3 projects are focused on targeted water quality improvements in identified watersheds, namely the Elizabeth, Lynnhaven, and Southern Rivers. Water quality projects like wet ponds, constructed wetlands, and manufactured treatment devices are implemented as part of these programs after they've gone through the planning process and are ready to move forward into the design phase. And larger projects may move forward as standalone projects in the CIP. The 4th project, Stormwater Quality Enhancements 2, is used for planning of stormwater quality improvements citywide. Also, some projects in watersheds that do not have a targeted CIP are constructed in this program. This CIP is also used for stormwater quality monitoring as a requirement of our permit. The fifth project, Surface Water Regulatory Compliance Program, is used for compliance with the specific requirements of the permit, and these requirements are summarized in our annual reports that are posted on our website. And then lastly, there's a focused water quality cost participation project that can be used to implement projects that have a shared benefit with private property owners. The total 6-year program cost is just under $80 million. One of 2 CIP projects to highlight today is the Bayville Lake Water Quality Improvement Project. This project is located at Bayville Park, where an existing pond retrofit is being designed to improve water quality in the Lynn Haven River watershed. Working with Parks and Recreation, this project will also provide opportunities to educate and engage the public on water quality issues. The project is just beginning the design phase, with construction scheduled in 2024. The second project to highlight this afternoon is the Kemps Lake Water Quality Improvement Project. This project is funded under the Elizabeth River Watershed Program, CIP 7406, and will also retrofit an existing lake to enhance the pollutant removal functions of the system. This project was selected by the Department of Environmental Quality for a $1.275 million in grant funding. The project is 95% design and is anticipated to start construction in 2021. So next, we will discuss briefly the stormwater challenges that we have encountered with this CIP. With the growing number of flood-prone areas, the evaluation of which flood control projects should be prioritized is a continual task. Existing infrastructure needs to be maintained while also realizing the need for new infrastructure. More frequent and intense rainfall events coupled with higher sea levels must also be addressed and considered. Stormwater needs are greater than available funding. And lastly, our current MS4 permit expires in June of 2021, and it is unknown at this point what new permit conditions may be imposed on the city. In spite of these challenges, we remain committed to addressing the stormwater needs of the city as detailed in this presentation. And that concludes the Stormwater CIP section. Thank you for your time. And next on the agenda is Mr. David Jarman to talk about roadways.
Okay. All right, good afternoon. My name is David Jarman. I'm going to be giving the roadway briefing for the current CIP, or the proposed CIP. We'll start off with an overview, just a broad agenda of the items we're going to discuss, similar format to the previous groups that you've seen. Next slide. And we're going to start off with a couple different breakdowns of the roadway CIP for you to look at. The first breakdown, we break this down by categories. So we have 4 categories: congestion relief and capacity improvements. That's going to cover about $76.8 million. Safety improvements will cover $28.5 million. Special projects are going to cover $35.7 million, and maintenance is going to cover $22.9 million. There are 2 projects and programs with respect to bridges that are handled under the maintenance section, and the total funding in years 1 through 6 is $163.9 million, and that covers 58 total projects and programs. The next slide, we're going to break the funding down for you, see what that looks like. You can see the city funding covers $163.9 million, and then the state covers $38 million, and the federal funding is $55 million for years 1 through 6. That gives us a total of about $93 million of the total funding of roughly $257 million. The total roadway program cost is $1.2 billion. Okay, so our next slide, we're going to talk about accomplishments. We'll hit some of the major projects there that we've got going on. These are in some form of construction right now, and I'll just hit a couple of the highlights. Indian River Road, Kempsville Road, that project is completed. That's one we've been talking about a lot here the past couple months. The Laskin Road projects, the next 2, 1A and the bridge replacement, are both VDOT managed projects, are under construction. These are the ones that will eliminate the feeder roads and replace the bridge on Laskin Road. Sandbridge Road bridge replacement is about 60% complete right now. Princess Anne Road Phase 7 is 37% complete. West Great Neck Road sidewalk that we just had a pre-construction meeting for that yesterday, and that project's going to start April 1st. And Witchduck Road Phase 2 is about 75% complete, and you can see the pictures shown there. On the operations side of the house, we have a couple of other programs that are in motion and projects as well. We've got the major bridge rehabilitation. The annual funding on that's about $1.5 million. This is for the inspection and rehabilitation of various bridges, culverts, and overpasses. And in that, they've included inspection and repairs to Punga Ferry Bridge and load ratings of other bridges and culverts. They've got some deck overlays and Long Creek Bridge rehab coming up in that as well. The next section, street reconstruction, Phase 2, that has an annual funding of $2.1 million. That one also is for rebuilding roadways as opposed to just doing mill and overlays. This is for a little more in-depth where you may have like a subgrade problem that you need to address. So that's what that CIP is used for. The accomplishments, they've already done sections of Princess Anne Road, Sandfiller Road, Providence Road, and Newtown Road. And there'll also be upcoming work done on Washington Square Alleys and Sandfiller Road. The last item there is Buccaneer Road bulkhead replacement. That was a $4.5 million project. It was completed in March of this year. We removed about 2,100 feet of existing bulkhead and replaced it with steel-coated bulkhead with concrete cap. And you can see the picture of that there at the bottom. All right, the next section is projects with no changes. We'll move right into some of the tables. I won't go through all of these projects, but you can see a list of these projects that have all been funded within target. And there's no major changes on these. Excuse me. If you look at the projects with asterisks, I'll note this on the next slide as well. Any project that has an asterisk in it has state or federal funding on it. So you can see between those two lists, we have about 23 out of 35 projects shown that has some form of state or federal funding. So we've got a good amount of funding on those. The next slide shows some of the programs. And again, this is important programs that we need in the roadway CIP. I will point out, I believe in the, the hard copy, project number 6 on the presentation was inadvertently left out. That's the traffic safety improvements. That was just an oversight. And that's a very important program. We definitely don't want to leave that out. That's the program that we use for funding a lot of the COF, the competitively obtained funding. That's our matching. We use that for matching grants. And we also use that for preliminary engineering to submit for grant funding. So that's a very important program that we use quite a bit. And of those, you can see there's 3 of the 8 are have federal and state funding as well. So we'll highlight just a couple of projects real quick in this section with no changes. The first one is First Colonial Virginia Beach Boulevard. These are improvements at the intersection with turn lanes and signalization upgrades. We're doing utility relocations underground at the intersection. The design is complete. The acquisition is complete. We're about 60 to 65% done with utility relocations. We're hoping to start here early summer. Total project cost is $30.9 million. All right, the next project is Rosemont Road Phase 5. This was the section between Lynn Haven and Dam Neck Road. This would complete the additional 2 lanes to give us 4 lanes total from Lynn Haven Parkway south to Dam Neck. It's about 1.3 miles. We're going to have a shared use path. The design's about 60% complete. We're going to be using some stormwater improvements from Lansdowne Road Phase 1. We'll talk about that in a little bit to offset some improvements here. And utility relocations are going to go from overhead to underground. Construction start on that is September of 21. Total project cost is $19.7 million. Next project is Shore Drive Phase 3. Again, this is the section from Vista Circle to North Great Neck Road. There's no capacity expansion on this. We're retaining the 4 lanes. Safety improvements, pedestrian improvements, drainage improvements as well. We're currently at 100% design with acquisition in progress. Utility relocations are going to be undergrounded at the signalized intersections only. The construction start is slated right now for August of 21, and the total project cost is $29.1 million. All right, next section is projects that are being modified. We're going to walk through a couple of those. First project is Centerville Turnpike Phase 2. This is the 4-lane section from Indian River Road south to Kempsville Road. We're currently at 90% design, and we had some cost increases and some schedule impacts on that. Most of the cost increases were due to stormwater design changes that were made and some refining some earthwork quantities that we came through with the latest estimate update. We also are having some delays with the private utility design, getting our easement requirements from utilities. and we anticipate there'll be some relocation impacts as well as some acquisition impacts as well. And you can see down here at the bottom, this will be typical for a lot of projects in this section. We have a note about funding being modified to support some of the building renovations. So some of the money was adjusted here to accommodate the building renovations that have been spoken about. So that'll be reflected down here in the changes, but if there's a schedule change as a result of that, we'll highlight that and mention that as well. So right now, it's just a budget change of $1.1 million, which brings our total project cost to $44.1 million. All right, next slide. Centerville Turnpike Phase 3. Again, this is the sister project to Centerville Phase 2. This is the 4-lane divided for Kempsville Road south to the Chesapeake City line. We're currently at 60% design. Again, we've refined our stormwater design and our pavement design, which has had a pretty significant impact on the project cost. And the construction start right now is slated for November of 2023. And again, this was modified to support some of the building renovations. The cost increase on that is shown at $4.7 million, and the total project cost is now $42.8 million. All right, the next project is Cleveland Street Improvements Phase 4. This is the originally 4-lane divided section from Witch Duck Road to Independence Boulevard. It's since been modified to a 3-lane section. And some of those changes were done with regards to right-of-way. We've had some cost increases to reflect more right-of-way impacts that are anticipated in that area. This is a smart-scale project, so we do have federal money on that. There's no schedule change to that. This also was modified to support some of the building renovations. And again, the schedule wasn't impacted, so it was just some money that was moved in earlier years. So the cost increase was $1.4 million, and the total project cost is $25 million right now. All right, the next project is Elbow Road Phase 2D. This will be the last phase of Elbow Road, thankfully. This will be the final 2 lanes from Salem Road to the Virginia Beach Amphitheater, include sidewalk and on-road bike lanes. And in this particular case, the FY22 funds were moved to FY24, and you can see down at the bottom some of the pluses and minuses there to show that. Again, as part of the building renovations, and the total project cost remains at $27.3 million. All right, the next project is Farrell Parkway. This is providing an additional westbound lane from Indian Lakes Boulevard to Indian River Road. We're going to include a turn lane at Indian Lakes Boulevard with also bike and pedestrian accommodations. This is going to be a good improvement in light of the Indian River Kempsville finishing up. This will provide some needed improvements in this section as well, so that'll be a good addition. And again, this had some minor impacts because of the building renovations, and the total project cost there is $4.1 million. That remains unchanged. All right, the next project is Lansdowne Road Phase 1. This is a project to widen Lansdowne Road from the Sportsplex south to the bend in Lansdowne Road. The design is complete on that. Utility relocations are in progress. And the funding on this one has been shifted quite a bit. We moved funding from FY21 to 26, and you can see the construction start now has changed to July of 2025. And that's noted with the renovations as well as the schedule impacts. The total project cost is $10.2 million. We did leave some money to accommodate some of the drainage improvements that will be needed on this project, as well as for Rosemont Road. So we will accommodate both of those projects in an earlier phase. All right, the next project, Laskin Road Phase 3. This will be the 6-lane section from Republic Road to Phillips Avenue. Right now, there's been a minor change as far as the funding goes with the appropriations to date. You can see the $300,000 noted there below. The construction start has been delayed beyond the current program. We are looking at submitting applications for Smart Scale Round 4 and RSTP funding in FY26. For FY26 or 27, they could include an innovative design option to hopefully make that more attractive as far as an application, grant application. Total project cost on that's $31.5 million. The next project program is Major Bridge Rehabilitation, and this is simply an allocation from an insurance payment that was made due to a barge collision back in November of 2018. So the money's just being received back from the insurance reimbursement. So that's all it's intended and all that's shown here. All right, next project. Newtown Road, Baker Road intersection improvements. This is providing additional turn lanes to address safety and congestion issues. Funds were moved from FY21 to 23. You can see that below. and that pushes the schedule construction start to February of 2026, and the total project cost on that remains $1 million. Next project is Nimmo Parkway Phase 2A. This is the two-lane undivided roadway from West Neck Road to the Vet Care Center. This is a roundabout would be included at Nimmo Parkway and West Neck Road. It's about 700 feet of roadway, and the construction start is slated for early summer of this year. And this project did receive $4 million in state funding that's appropriated in FY21, and that's shown below. The next project is Shore Drive Phase 4. This is the 4-lane section from Marlin Bay to East Stratford Drive. Again, no capacity improvement here. The design had started and made it to about 30%, and it's been on hold for quite a while, so we're having to go back and essentially reinitiate that, get some of the surveying updated and things like that. In addition here, the FY21 funds were moved to FY24. It doesn't change the construction start date because the funding wasn't coming in until outer years anyways, so that worked out okay. And you can see the total project cost there is at $15.5 million. All right, the next project is actually a program for traffic calming. This is the city's traffic calming program to handle the various phases that are included in that. Some of those are physical improvements, like what you see here with the speed table at Aragona, and some are police enforcement on streets and other efforts there. So this program covers the gamut there, and you can see down below the change is increasing that by $50,000 a year. All right, the next slide is the traffic signal rehabilitation. This allows for rehab and update of older signal components, and also changing out mast arms, span wires to mast arms. And you can see in the third or the bottom, the last bullet, that there's about $8.5 million backlog of span wires that need to be modified to mast arm signal poles. So there's plenty of work there that needs to be done. And the change that's shown here is an additional $150,000 a year to help move that along and change components. All right, the next program is traffic signal retiming. Again, this is where we go in and retime the corridors along major city roadways. Good example of this is the Indian River corridor that's being retimed or analyzed now after the Indian River Kempsville intersection is complete. We have the ability to expand some of the efficiencies to the adjacent intersections and take advantage of the improvements that have been made. So that the whole idea is to reduce delay and improve safety with this program. We do have a pending CMAQ application for federal grant funding for FY26 and 27, but the big change here is just an additional $150,000 a year for the program. And the last slide in this section is for West Neck Road Phase 4. Again, this is the two-lane section from Kellum Road South to Kings Landing Development. It's a cost participation with the developer. It's about 1.1 miles, and we're going to be providing paved shoulder for cyclists and shared use path. The construction is still slated to start this fall, October of 20. And this also was a recipient of additional $6 million in state funding for FY21. That's shown below. Total project cost is still $9.4 million. So new projects, the only new project we have in the proposed CIP right now is raising Punga Ferry Road improvements for recurring flooding. This will be raising Punga Ferry Road from Blackwater Road to the west side of Punga Ferry Road Bridge approach. It's about 2 miles, and the idea here is to reduce the road closings due to recurring flooding. You can see the total project cost there is $11.5 million, and the balance to complete BTC is $4.3 million. And then finally, we'll just talk about a few challenges in the roadway program right now. The first challenge, probably the most significant at this point, is the funding. Obviously, we all want funding for our programs, and that's why we're here. But one of the things we want to just be mindful of is with we know stormwater is important, and that's a priority, and we certainly understand that because we have that on road projects as well. But we just want to make sure as we're reducing roadway funding that we're mindful that we need a certain level of funding to leverage grants, federal grants and state grants. So we want to be careful that if we reduce that we do keep a manageable amount so that we can use that for going after grants and having matching funds for that. That's an important component of the program. Secondly, franchise utility impacts. We've been dealing with a lot of delays on the design side and the construction side for utility relocations. It's been difficult getting resources to do designs and construction. We've seen that with most of the franchise utilities. We're trying to work through them with that. We're trying to give as much notice as we can, advance notice about needs. But it's difficult because there's a lot of competing interests even within the city and also with VDOT and other major construction projects. So we're finding that's having an impact on our schedules as well. The third bullet is right-of-way acquisitions. There certainly are resource issues that we're trying to work through with our real estate group. And certainly we're taking a look at third-party services as well to help supplement that. But overall, that's taking a little bit longer also right now. And then finally, environmental permitting, especially on some of the larger projects, is certainly receiving more scrutiny and taking additional time to work through the process. So those are some of the bigger challenges we've got going on right now. And that's it for the roadway section. I'm going to turn it over to Dan Adams for coastal update.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening. I'm Dan Adams. I'll be presenting the coastal CIP section. So good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Last year's coastal CIP budget brief was very detailed. We went over each project scope and in detail. This year is going to be more focused on the 6-year funding schedule and changes to last year's adopted CIP budget. Format will be the same as the previous presentations. We'll do a quick funding summary. We'll go over some of our recent accomplishments. We will review projects and programs with no changes. We'll review the projects and programs being modified in this year's proposed CIP. We have a couple of new programs and projects being introduced into the program, and then we'll close out with some challenges. The overview. The bulk of the funding in the coastal CIP is for beach replenishment, comprising 73% of the total cost at about $64.3 million. The total years 1 through 6 program funding in the entire CIP is roughly $88 million. The total program cost for the CIP, including appropriations to date, is about $168 million. We do have 26 coastal projects and programs in the CIP. Quick review of some recent accomplishments. One major accomplishment is the last year's restoration of the resort beach. We placed 1.4 million cubic yards of sand from 15th Street to 70th Street. Total cost for that project was $24.3 million. The city was able to leverage federal funding with our $8 million contribution, which comprised about 35% of the total project cost. That's an Army Corps administrated project. Also, we completed last year Lynnhaven Inlet maintenance dredging. It's also a partnership project with the Army Corps of Engineers. It was $2.8 million worth of dredging, and the city was able to leverage that project with a contribution of $750,000. We dredged 170,000 cubic yards of material from the federal inlet and channel system. That yielded beach quality sand that was placed on Cape Henry Beach, the Narrows Beach, and the remainder in our Maple Street dredge management area. Just underway as we speak is the next cycle of replenishment of Sandbridge Beach. This is also a Army Corps partnership project. Unlike Resort Beach and Lynnhaven, the federal government did not appropriate their full cost share for this project. They have indicated they are going to bring up to $3 million of federal funding. The project is underway, is to be completed by May 23rd. The contractor is Great Lakes Dredge and Dock. They also performed the Resort Beach project last year. The Dredge Liberty just sailed north last night from Bogue Inlet, North Carolina. It's now in Port Norfolk, getting crew change, taking on supplies, and expected to be out dredging and pumping sand on the beach. Maybe not tomorrow due to the weather, but probably sometime later this week. Our next major restoration project in the queue is Ocean Park Beach. That is going to be a locally funded shore protection project, and that has a scheduled bid opening of next week. I'm going to review the projects and programs with no changes. The first group are our coastal projects. Project number 2 is the Eastern Branch Lynnhaven River dredging, currently under design. The remaining projects on the list comprise 6 of our 8 neighborhood dredging projects. No funding changes from last year's CIP. We also have ongoing programs with no changes. Most of these are our federal cost share projects that include number 3, beach replenishment, number 5, Lynnhaven Inlet dredging, number 7, Rudy Inlet dredging, which should be underway. The Army Corps is going to have that project out to bid in the coming weeks, and we expect that project to be delivered this summer. It includes some placement of sand on the Croatan Beach and a major dredging of Rudy Inlet, and also some placement of sand between the jetty and the pier at 15th Street. And last, number 10, it also includes our Sandbridge Beach Restoration CIP. So we have a few projects being modified from the adopted FY 2025 CIP. First is Pleasure House Point mitigation. This was development of a wetland mitigation bank, a environmental restoration project of a previously filled dredge area for Lynnhaven Inlet. This funding has been modified to support building renovations and is being restored in FY 26. So we now are looking at a construction start in FY 26 for Pleasure House Point mitigation. Companion project to that was our Pleasure House Point Mitigation Fund CIP. This provided startup funding and provided a guarantee for short-term, long-term maintenance of the mitigation facility that's required as part of our mitigation banking instrument document. That program funding has also been modified to support building renovations and will need to be restored in a future CIP. Replacement for the Rudy Inlet dredge was programmed for appropriations this year, and it was for this year. That funding has also been modified to support building renovations and is being mostly restored in FY 22. And a companion to that project was dredge operations rehab and modifications to accommodate a newer dredge vessel and to make some needed repairs to the berthing facilities at the dredge ops facility on Bells Road. That funding has also been delayed 1 year to support building renovations and is being restored in FY 22. Okay, new projects, Chesapeake and Colony neighborhood dredging. This is not a new project, it's a replacement of the ongoing dredging of Chesapeake and Colony. Project is substantially complete. We just have some minor touch-up dredging, restoration work remaining to be completed. Continuation of our Sand Beach restoration program for reintroducing Sandbridge Restoration 4 to receive SSD funds and program future replenishments of Sandbridge Beach. And we do have this is a new CIP, Shelling Point Neighborhood Dredging. This will be our 8th adopted neighborhood dredging special service district project. Design is complete. Our joint permit application is under review, and we're looking at getting this project out to bid later this year. Lastly, we're reintroducing the Western Branch Lynnhaven River maintenance dredging into the CIP in FY 25 and 26. It was last dredged in 2016, 2017. We're trying to keep this and the Eastern Branch projects moving forward on a 10-year dredging cycle. Coastal challenges, there are many. Why do we do beach nourishment? Now, the end result is a nice, wide recreational beach, but the reason why we do it is for storm damage reduction benefits and resiliency. Beach nourishment is the first line of defense against relative sea level rise. And continuation and funding for shore protection program is vital to maintain and sustain resilient beaches. It requires a sustained level of funding and commitment to project delivery. I show these photographs just to remind us that where we've been and how much progress we've made in shore protection. And just to close it out, with our recently completed projects and our planned beach nourishment projects that are in the queue, the city's beaches will be as healthy as they've been in the history of our city and will provide a very high level of storm protection and storm damage reduction. With that concludes the briefing. We'll look forward to any questions and comments. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dan. That concludes Public Works presentation on the buildings, coastal, transportation, and stormwater CIP for FY21.